Welcome everyone to Charts Focus 1, where we teach you how to work hard and trade smart. In this video, I'll be going over the technical analysis on the broader markets and on the tickers that we'll be looking at for this week. All right, let's start off with the S&P 500. So SPY last Friday, we ended up with a inverted hammer candlestick on the daily time frame, and this inverted hammer has a very nasty top wick or top shadow, and this indicates that there are a lot of sellers, and inherently a inverted hammer candlestick is very bearish. Why? Well, because if you think about it, a hammer candlestick is a very bullish candlestick. So if you're talking about an inverted hammer candlestick, we're talking about a complete opposite candlestick to the hammer candlestick. And that is the reason why that this inverted hammer candlestick is very bearish. Now, if you go on the 15-minute time frame, we created a huge level of supply, an area of sellers between 416.50 to 417. And we weren't able to get back above this area of supply to turn it into an area of demand. And so for the rest of the day on Friday, we continued to move lower and lower, making new lows and lower highs. And at one point, we reached a new low of the day at 411.10, beating the morning's low of 411.45. Now, on the intraday time frames, I am very bearish. Why? Well, if you look at the 2-hour time frame, we closed below the 10 SMA, and we have been riding this 10 SMA for quite some time during this entire rally. Every single time that we went slightly below it, we snapped back to the 10 SMA, and we've also retested the 21 SMA as well. And if you see here, let's just use this specific example right here. Okay, we stayed on top of the 10 SMA, and then the very next day we gapped down to retest the 21 SMA. And if you use another example, okay, we lost the 10 SMA here, and then we tried to lose the 21 SMA again, but we snapped right back to the 10 and 21 SMA once more. And this cycle repeated over and over again on the 2-hour time frame. So what do you think I'm going to expect to see SPY doing this week? So either we get a gap down to right at this 21 SMA, which is conveniently staying around that 408.50 level. And if we do gap down to this area, I fully expect to see a bounce at the 408.50 area, or simply once we retest the 21 SMA. Now, the other possibility is that we can open up flat on Monday, and we can see a slow move down, and we can see a slower progression of the second leg lower into the 2-hour 21 SMA right over here. And that could also mean that the 21 SMA can slowly rise up higher, because so far we're seeing the 21 SMA's ascension kind of slowing down here as it's kind of flatlining over here. And so I'm looking for at least a push lower to 410. And if we decide to stick around 410 for quite some time, that will also allow the 2-hour 21 SMA to eventually catch up to the price, and we can see a nice bounce from that point forward. And once we're able to see that bounce, we can see another revisit back to around 414 to 414.50, and possibly we can see a continuation to the upside and another retest into that heavy area of supply between 416.50 to 417. Now, this all depends on whether or not we want to have a nice consolidation right? A nice consolidation phase because we have ran so much since the beginning of this year. All right, so that is it for SPY. Let's take a look at the first name, Lucid. So Lucid had an stratospheric rise in share prices on Friday of 2 weeks ago. And this monstrous rise was due to a rumor of a private takeover on this company by the Saudis. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about that rumor, but this rumor allowed the price to have a huge jump on one trading day. And this usually gets my attention because when we start to pull back, we tend to have a very nice consolidation range. And on the initial jump up in price, which was this day here, is used as a flagpole, meaning that we could be forming a nice bull flag. And so far on every intraday time frame, for example, the 2 hour again, we seem to be making that exact bull flag that I am talking about right now, right? And so if we're able to complete this bull flag, this should definitely be on your watch list for the next couple of trading days or even the next couple of weeks. We should be able to see a very, very large breakout and even a larger breakout than the initial leg up higher. So Lucid here, I gave you guys kind of a different entry points. All right, one is an early entry point and the other will be more of a confirmation entry point. This $11 bounce entry is if we decide to use $11 as a level of support on this bull flag. And then if you want a little bit more of a confirmed entry point, along over 12.20 or around $12 will give you that confidence. Why? Well, if I'm assuming that we complete this bull flag, we can see a little bounce at 11, and then we can see more buying volume coming in to the point where we decide to break above this descending level of resistance and ultimately break over $12, and that could give you more confirmation. But again, this is a name that you should be looking at for the next few trading days or even the next few weeks as this chart pattern progresses. And the reason why I say that as well is that, well, on the daily RSI, we are very much overbought. So in order for this RSI to recalibrate back to around 40s to 50s for its value, we will need to see the price pull back or simply move sideways with very, very low volume. And that is what we call a consolidation phase. Okay, so our second name here is Beyond. So Beyond on the weekly time frame just broke out. So 2 weeks ago, we broke out over $17.20 or simply $17. And on the weekly time frame, we're forming a multi-month base between $12 and $17. And so 2 weeks ago, we decided to break above that $17 resistance as most beaten down and most shorted names started to short squeeze higher along with the market trending up higher as well. And so last week, Beyond decided to continue that squeeze higher, and we ultimately ended up retesting a very macro, huge, and significant weekly level of previous support at 21.40. But now that we've rejected it on Friday, okay, or I believe it was on Thursday, yes. So on Thursday, when we rejected it, we have now turned that weekly level of resistance of 21.40 well, into a new level of resistance. I think I just repeated myself there. But the reason why I'm pointing that out is that you can have a future long-term entry point over 21.20, which is why this is our confirmation entry point. Now, this is where things can get a little bit complicated. So on the first entry point here, I said you can short under $19. Why? Well, if you take a look on the 2-hour time frame, and if my analysis for the overall market was correct or is proven to be correct, I would expect Beyond to break below the 10 SMA on its own 2-hour time frame and eventually head back down to its own 2-hour 21 SMA, and that's where you can probably take profits, or you can wait until the price decides to finally fill in the gap that it failed to do on Friday. Because if we had a very larger and a much larger sell-off on Friday, we could have most likely filled in this gap up that we made between Wednesday and Thursday of last week. And that is the reason why I gave you guys a short entry. Now, if that short entry works out perfectly and we decide to fill in the gap here, we should be able to revisit this previous level of resistance. And if we do, I expect to see a bounce. And what's amazing is that the 10 SMA is conveniently at that area, with the 21 SMA still curling higher and trying to catch up to the price. So I fully expect this name to start flagging as well if we decide to not come all the way back down to 17.20 to try to fill in this gap. All right, and if we decide to just stick around between, I would say, 19 to the 21s, then we will most likely see a flag form. Now, what's also interesting, and the very last thing here for Beyond, is that we have formed a inside candlestick compared to Thursday's candlestick. So Friday's candlesticks is pretty interesting here, as this inside candlestick usually indicates that we're ready for a continuation run. And that may have been a reason why on Friday, after hours, we saw a little bump in price where the price went above to $20. Okay, so our third name here is GM, or General Motors. So General Motors on the weekly time frame, we're making a very large base, or simply a W chart pattern. And if you guys remember, a W chart pattern is essentially a double bottom. And this double bottom was slightly weird because it is slanted, right? We have this slope where we have the first bottom on the left and then the second bottom on the right. Now, I gave you guys a short entry here under 41 because if you take a look on the daily time frame, right, we are very much overextended and far away from our 10 and 21 SMAs. Remember, my 10 and 21 is my momentum pair. So in order to continue the momentum, we need the help and support of both the 10 and 21. And if the price is too far away from these SMAs, the price will want to come back down to catch up, or vice versa, where the 10 and 21 SMAs decide to catch up while the price decides to consolidate and move sideways. And so if that first situation happens when the price decides to move down and catch up to retest on the 10 and 21, then we can definitely see a entry point below 41, most definitely. And if you want more details, just go on the 2-hour time frame, and you guys should be seeing a pattern here. The 10 SMA, right, is sitting right at 41. And so if you're able to break below the 10 SMA, that would also mean that we'll be breaking below 41, and that will be your sign to short. And what's great about GM here as well, just like Beyond, we have a couple of gap ups that we need to fill. We need to fill one right here and right here. So we have 2 gaps to fill. And so once we're done, filling the gap, we can see definitely a support buyback around, 38, 37.50, or even $40. However, I did not put those levels here for you guys because if we decide to flag, right, just like Beyond, like I said earlier, we can see a confirmed entry point over $42. Why? Well, if you go back on the weekly time frame, this 42 level is a huge, significant level of resistance, and it's serving as the major level of resistance for this double bottom or this W chart pattern. And if we are not patient, we can be completely smacked down as we have already rejected from that $42 level. How do we know this? Well, when the first time when we rose up and retested the $42 level, we did exactly that. We got smacked down rather quickly. So if we really want to see a break over 42 on the weekly time frame, we need to start consolidating most likely around, I would say, 40 to 41, right? But if you guys want a bigger range, I would say anything under $42, and especially if the price decides to consolidate underneath 42, that'll be a great time to be looking at this name to try to long over $42. All right, so our fourth name here is FTNT. Now, the reason why I chose this one is that, well, this one has been lagging. Why? Well, with most software names, they have actually broken out. And if you guys remember, I paired up FTNT and NET. And if you take a look at NET and FTNT, there's something surprisingly different about the two. NET has broken out to the upside out of this descending level of resistance and has gone up multiple times throughout the entire last week and last week as well. But for FTNT on the weekly time frame, we have bounced and we have moved up, but very, very small, right? In a very, very small amount of time as well. And so we haven't moved as much, right? Even though we had the opportunity in the markets to move up. And so this is considered a laggard stock. And if you guys remember, FTNT has been making this huge macro bull flag for the entire year of 2022, including the last end of 2021. And so hopefully this name this year decides to break over and out of this descending level of resistance that comes from this very, very large bull flag on the weekly time frame, and eventually it is able to retest the weekly 50 SMA, this dark blue line here, and retest this major level of resistance at $55. And if that happens, then we can see a great breakout to the upside. Now with that in mind, I gave you guys an entry point at $54, specifically 54.10. And the reason for this entry point is that, well, this is frankly a early entry. Why? Well, on the daily time frame, we're still seeing heavy support at the 10 SMA. How do we know this? Well, the price is still sticking to the 10 SMA, and it seems like we are trying to consolidate from this point forward, which will allow the 21 here to cross over the 50 SMA, this dark blue line, eventually breaking above $50 and $51, and then it should be able to retest with the price at some point as the price continues to consolidate right underneath this descending level of resistance as we saw in the weekly time frame, plus the daily 200 SMA. So if we're able to consolidate really well above $52 and underneath 54, we should be able to see a very nice breakout to the upside. So let me give you guys a little tiny hint here, right? This is what I'm expecting to see, right? Where the price is constantly oscillating and eventually it decides to break over 54 as the price gets really compressed and the volume becomes very, very low. Now I gave you guys all of this for FTNT, but guess what? We have earnings this week, right, on Tuesday. So if earnings are bad or if earnings are good, right, we wouldn't really know what the reaction will be, okay? But earnings may be the catalyst, right? It may be the significant catalyst that this name needs to actually catapult away from this descending level of resistance and eventually break out of that weekly bull flag that I've just shown you guys here. Okay, so our last name here is Dish. So Dish on the weekly time frame looks very, very interesting. Why? Well, Dish is also one of those quote-unquote laggard names. It's not really a laggard after having almost a 5% close on the weekly time frame last week. However, it is still a laggard because we haven't seen that amazing short squeeze that all these names that have been shorted to the ground, not moving, right? This name hasn't moved just like all those other names that have moved the past 2 weeks. So this here has to break over $16 in order to have that huge, immense breakouts that every other bigly shorted names have been having for the last couple of weeks. And that's the reason why I give you guys that long-term entry point at $16 or over 16.10 specifically. However, on the daily time frame on last Friday's candlestick, we ended up with an inverted doji, right? This is also what we call a gravestone doji. And this gravestone doji indicates a clear downtrend reversal. And so just like with every other stock that we're looking at for a potential move to the downside this week, we're all looking at a bearish candlestick from Friday that can carry on over to Monday. And that's the reason why I said we can have a nice long bounce at 14.50 or $15. Now, why 14.50? Well, if the price decides to move lower, especially if the market decides to move lower as well, it can affect this name to move lower and eventually hit around 14.50. And why do I also say that? Well, we have our major SMAs. They're all coiling here. The 10, which is the red one, the 21, which is my light blue one here, and then the 50, which is my dark blue line here. And so if we're able to come back down and retest 14.50 or at least around 14.60, we should be able to see a nice retest on all my SMAs, including that 14.50 level. And we can potentially see a very large bounce back into $15 and eventually, hopefully, back above $15. Okay, so that is it for tonight. Hopefully you guys set up your alerts and hopefully you guys are hawking every single name that we've been trading for the past couple of weeks so that you guys can always review the trades that we made and also look at the same names that can provide some very good opportunities in the future. All right, have a great rest of your night and I'll see you guys back in the CFO Discord. Thank you for listening.